All right, let's jump right into this explainer. When we talk about To Kill a Mockingbird, it's literally so easy to just fixate on Atticus, Scout, or Jem, right? But today, our entire focus is going to be educating you about Charles Baker Harris, better known to us as Dill. We're going to look at how Harper Lee uses this seemingly minor supporting character not just as like background dressing, but as the literal engine of the plot and, honestly, the moral barometer for a deeply flawed town. Just think about this whimsical little description from Scout for a second. It introduces us to a boy who is completely, physically, and symbolically distinct from everyone else in Maycomb. I mean, hair like duck fluff and Snow White. It isn't just some cute, quirky detail. Based on the academic essays in our sources, it actually represents this pure, untainted childhood innocence, something that Maycomb County is desperately lacking. Dill essentially arrives as a total blank slate. He's the stark contrast to a community that's just weighed down by generations of deep-seated prejudice. So, to really get a handle on how this kid changes the entire story, here's our roadmap. We're going to officially meet Charles Baker Harris, dig into his real-world connection to Truman Capote, see how he sparks the whole Boo Radley plot, uncover the sad reality of his broken home, look at his loss of innocence during the trial, and finally explore his role as a true Mockingbird of Maycomb. Let's dive in. Okay, so first things first. Let's start by looking at who Dill actually is, just on the surface. When we first meet him, Dill is 7 years old, and crucially, he's an outsider. He's from Meridian, Mississippi, and he only comes to Maycomb every summer to visit his Aunt Rachel. And because he's an outsider, Dill brings this incredibly fresh, totally unbiased perspective. He hasn't grown up inside Maycomb's echo chamber of racial and class prejudices. For Scout, as she famously puts it, summer was Dill. He is literally a breath of fresh air in an otherwise stagnant, oppressive environment. And man, just consider the rapid-fire, completely exaggerated tall tales from this kid. Scout calls him a pocket Merlin, and it is so fitting. I mean, he claims he's been up in a mail plane 17 times, he's traveled to Nova Scotia, seen an actual elephant, and, oh yeah, just casually mentions his granddaddy was Brigadier General Joe Wheeler, who left him his sword. It's wild. Dill lives in this twilight world of pure imagination. His head is absolutely teeming with eccentric plans and strange longings, which makes him such a captivating, even if completely unreliable, storyteller. Now, let's pivot a bit and look at how art imitates life here, because Dill's real-world origins are absolutely fascinating. The really crucial point to grasp is that Dill isn't just a purely fictional creation. If you compare them side by side, Dill is heavily based on Harper Lee's real-life childhood friend, who just so happens to be the legendary author Truman Capote. It's so cool. Just like Dill, Capote was sent to spend his summers living with relatives in Monroeville, Alabama, and Monroeville is, of course, the real-world inspiration for Maycomb. Both the fictional boy and the real boy were these famously creative, kind of peculiar outsiders who formed a super tight bond with a tomboyish local girl. And the academic analysis really backs this up. We have a top-tier exam response in our sources pointing out that Dill's relationship with the Finches, like specifically Scout proudly claiming he's her permanent fiancé, that directly mirrors the profound childhood bond between Harper Lee and Truman Capote. It just goes to show that the dynamic in Maycomb wasn't pulled out of thin air, It was deeply rooted in Lee's actual childhood experiences with a boy who shared Dill's massive, wild imagination. But beyond his real-world origins, Dill serves a massive mechanical function in the plot itself. He is the ultimate catalyst for adventure. Like Scout notes right early on, the entire narrative thread regarding Boo Radley only kicks off when Dill gives them the idea to make him come out. Think about it. Jem and Scout had lived right next door to the Radley place their entire lives. But it took this imaginative outsider coming in to finally push them to investigate the malevolent phantom living next door. In fact, one of the Examiner reports we reviewed highlights that Dill's seemingly limitless imagination is the exact root cause of this whole fascination. Remember the dare? Dill bets Jem his book, The Gray Ghost, that he won't go up and touch the Radley front door. Now, Dill knows perfectly well Jem never declines a dare, so he willingly risks his own book just to force some sort of reaction from Boo. This one little moment pushes the entire narrative forward. It's the catalyst that eventually turns Boo Radley from a local spooky myth into an actual, real human being they interact with. However, there is a much sadder reality behind all those tall tales. Dill's wild imagination? It's actually a shield.
When you look at his home life, it's pretty stark. We eventually find out that Dill doesn't have his biological father around, and while his mother and his new stepfather aren't physically abusive, like Bob Ewell, for instance, they completely neglect him emotionally. They try to just buy his affection with toys, essentially telling him, hey, now that you got it, go play with it. They make it painfully clear that they honestly get on much better when he's just not around.
One of the student analyses expertly breaks this down. They highlight that even though Dill gets whatever he wants materially, he is profoundly dissatisfied. Why? Because his parents outright refuse to actually spend time with him. And suddenly, it all makes sense, right? This is exactly why he fabricates those grand, heroic tales about his father. It's why he literally runs away from home, traveling 300 miles just to hide under Scout's bed. All of that lying and running, it's born from a deep isolation. It's a desperate craving for the attention and love that he completely lacks back in Meridian. And that intense emotional vulnerability, it perfectly sets the stage for his tragic, heartbreaking reaction to injustice during the trial of Tom Robinson. Picture the courtroom scene. When the prosecuting attorney, Mr. Gilmer, cross-examines Tom Robinson, Dill just entirely breaks down. Our sources highlight how Gilmer repeatedly sneers and calls Tom boy. And Dill is so emotionally devastated by this blatant, hateful prejudice that he literally burst into uncontrollable sobs. He has to actually leave the courtroom. Scout tries to comfort him, saying, it's just the prosecutor's job. But Dill isn't having it. He replies, "It was the way he said it made me sick, plain sick. It ain't right to do him that way." This whole sequence is a brilliant example of a Bildungsroman, a coming-of-age story that really focuses on the moral and psychological growth of a character. In this moment, Dill's childhood purity is completely shattered by the harsh, ugly reality of the adult world. Unlike Jem, who wants to actively confront the prejudice, or the rest of Macomb, who have just completely normalized it, Dill is simply sickened. He's physically sickened by the cruelty that humans can inflict on one another. What's incredibly interesting from one of the top-scoring exam responses we looked at is how it perfectly proves Dill's value to the story. The student argues that because Dill is unbiased, because he isn't, quote, infected by Macomb's usual disease, he's the absolute only one who reacts naturally to the gross injustice of that trial. His emphatic defense of Tom Robinson comes from a place of pure, unfiltered empathy. He acts as this powerful moral mirror for us as readers, because he clearly sees what all the adults refuse to see. Which finally brings us to his ultimate thematic role in the novel, a true Mockingbird of Macomb. As noted in our source materials, Dill is a character who represents a massive, tragic loss of innocence. Remember what Atticus teaches about the Mockingbird? It only sings, it makes music, it does no harm. Dill is exactly like that. He just wants to tell his stories, play games with his friends, and find a family that actually loves him. But just by observing that trial, he gets irreparably damaged by the toxic environment of the adult world. His innocence is effectively killed by the hatred he's forced to witness. And because of that, he comes to this incredibly poignant, just heartbreaking conclusion. Realizing he has no power to change the world, he decides his only defense mechanism is to become a cynical clown who just laughs at humanity. He literally tells Scout he's going to join the circus. It's a sad reflection of his absolute lack of power as a child trying to navigate a deeply unjust system. So I want to leave you with this final thought. Through Dill Harris, Harper Lee isn't just giving us a quirky sidekick for Scout and Jem. She's showing us the incredibly heavy price a society pays when its most innocent members are broken by prejudice. It really asks us to consider, if Dill represents the innocence Macomb lacks, what happens to society when characters like him are forced to grow up? What happens to our own world when the pure, unbiased empathy of a child is replaced by the cynicism of adulthood? Definitely think about that the next time you read this classic. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep learning.